Good evening, everybody. This is Anita Slate. I'm a library assistant here at the River Falls Public Library. And tonight I'm thrilled to introduce romance and women's fiction author Kristan Higgins. She's a New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly bestselling author of more than 20 novels. Her books have received dozens of awards and accolades. Her latest book out is called Pack Up the Moon, and in June, her newest book, Out of the Clear Blue Sky, will be out. So welcome, Kristan.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I wanted to start out before we get to our little slideshow. If you wanted to just talk a little bit about your growing up in the Northeast part of the country and your family, schools, jobs, and stuff before you started writing.
Sure. I am a Connecticut Yankee. My great-grandparents immigrated from Hungary in the early teens of a century ago. And we are, proud working class folk. My parents got married at 21 and had my brother, sister, and me in the next 3 years, 3 kids in 3 years, very ambitious. And so I grew up very close to my very large extended family. My mom is one of 9 children, and I have dozens of cousins. And I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, kind of a rural part of the state, where there are dairy farms and horse farms, and went to college in Massachusetts. So I never left that. I never got that far. Worked in New York City for a little while, got married, and came back to Connecticut. And I currently live in my hometown.
All right.
I will live here forever if all goes well.
What kind of jobs did you have before you started writing, or have you always been writing?
No, I've been one of those kids who's worked since I was 11. I was a babysitter. I worked as a clerk in a store, cleaning lady, nanny. I answered phones for a while, medical transcriptionist. And then I worked in advertising. That was kind of my career job. And that's a pretty good way to get into fiction, is to work in advertising. You learn to write on deadline. You learn to write vibrant copy, hopefully. And then I had my daughter, and a couple of years later, my son. And I was a stay-at-home mom, which I loved. And I decided to start writing books kind of on a whim, because I wanted to keep staying home. And I thought, well, what can I do from home? This was before, people worked from home. And I thought, well, I used to waitress, so I could waitress or bartend again. Or maybe I could write a book, because I've read a lot of books, right? So how hard could it be? So I kind of whimsically started writing a book in my 30s, and that first book got published. And I, much to my surprise, here I am, almost 20 years later, with 22 books under my belt, and I've kind of surprised that it turned into a career. It's not really something that you can plan on, and I've just been very, very lucky and hardworking, of course.
I'm going to add this in here now, and just going to click. Whoops. Let's start with your very first book.
Okay.
You want to talk a little bit about each of these little books?
Sure. Fools Rush In was my first book. It's a romantic comedy set on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where my family has a small home. And it's a love story to Cape Cod, first and foremost. But it's kind of a Cinderella story where this kind of plain Jane woman who has loved one man since she was 14 years old decides that this is the year to get him. She's back from medical school. She owns her own house. She has a good job, and she thinks, I'm finally ready to date Joe Carpenter. And of course, even though she's thought he was the one for her all along, he's not. There's another guy in town. So that was a really fun book to write. And again, that was my first completed manuscript.
And you had a different working title before Fools Rush In came about. Do you want to tell us that?
I called it Stalking Joe, which I thought was delightful and funny, because she stalks this guy. She knows when he goes to the post office and how he takes his coffee at Dunkin', and in high school when he went to his locker. So I think a lot of women, myself included, have done that to a guy, and I wanted to just be honest about it. And my publisher thought it was a little bit too dark. It could be interpreted as dark, even with a pink cover and a cute little dog. So they changed it to Fools Rushed In. So I was a baby author, and you don't get a lot of say about your titles or your covers, but
I think you've been blessed with some amazing covers and some
I
amazing
agree.
titles. So
That
this is
first one I absolutely love.
yeah,
It's so cute.
yeah. I was going to say you also got a best book of the year from a website, which is
Yeah,
pretty cool for your first
it
published book.
it was
So
so exciting.
yeah.
My first
All
award.
right. I also wanted to mention you have had a lot of translated books in about how many, 20 some languages?
I know I'm up over 2 dozen,
Yeah,
so yeah, a
that's
lot of
pretty amazing as
it's
well.
so thrilling, and it's the kind of thing that just sort of happens without your knowledge. Your agent makes a sale, and suddenly you're published in Hungarian or Estonian or, Hindi or something like that, so it's
Yeah,
very, very thrilling.
very cool. All right. Talk about this book a little bit.
The catch of the day.
Yes.
This is the story of Maggie Beaumont, who runs a tiny little diner in a tiny little town in the very north coast of Maine. And she meets this guy. He walks into the diner one day, and she just thinks, "Oh my God, he's the one. He's Irish. He's so nice. He's wonderful." And she somehow misses the fact that he's also the new Catholic priest in town. And being that it's a town of 700 people, by the time Sunday Mass rolls around, everyone knows that Maggie has fallen in love with some guy named Tim. And they all find out at church just who that is. So that my original title for that was called Dating Father Tim. She never does date him. He's perfectly appropriate as a priest, but boy, does she have a crush on him. And I'm a Catholic. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic girls' school, Catholic college. Every heterosexual female Catholic student has had a crush on a priest.
That is funny. Um, Also, you had a story about with your dad and a lobster boat.
Yeah, when I was 7 years old, my dad took me to Maine, and we were in this little town called Ogunquit, and he asked a fisherman if we could go out on his lobster boat, and the lobster boat was called the Ugly Ann, and the hero's boat in this story is also called the Ugly Ann. After that first lobster boat I ever went out on, and then years and years later, after the book came out, the owner of the boat wrote to me and said, "I own a boat called the Ugly Ann. Is it a coincidence that your boat in the book is named after this?" I said, "No, I went out on your boat when I was 7 years old." So that was really a really happy reconnection there.
That's awesome. And this for your second book, won a Rita Award, which is a big thing in the romance world. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah, that
that's
was
pretty awesome.
a wonderful night.
And here's a couple other, I just love your covers.
Thank you.
All right. You want to talk about Just One of the
This
Guys?
One of the Guys is, as you can tell from the title, is about a woman, a tomboy, and she has 4 older heroic brothers who work in the police and firefighting service, and they're all, alpha males, and she's always been seen as, just one of the guys, and she's been in love for as long as she can remember with her brother's best friend, Trevor. But she's off limits because she's one of the guys. She's the little sister of these 4 guys. So I loved writing this story. I think it's my funniest book in a lot of ways. It has a lot of really hilarious, goofy things that happen to Chastity and also to her dog, a big lazy bloodhound named Buttercup.
Um, and this is the book that you almost got halfway done and you started over.
Yeah, I felt like I had this great idea. The tomboy, the 4 older brothers, and I started writing it, and I originally the father had died in
Mhm.
the story, and it was just it was just too sad that way. So I thought I wrote, I think, 245 pages, and I said, this book is horrible. It's a good idea. What happened to that good idea? It's lost in this kind of sad, drecky mess where the heroine's thinking about donating a kidney and the dad is dead. And so I threw out the entire thing and just kept the idea, started over. In this case, her parents were divorced, but still kind of together. And her mother decides that she wants a real boyfriend now. And she says to Chastity, you and I can start looking for boyfriends together. So how fun, right?
Right. All right. Let me move to the next one. I just loved your first covers. I think I'm never sure. Well, was that your first cover, the one on the left?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the thing about covers is it takes a while before you get a say over your covers. And then if your books do well, they are reissued every few years so that your new readers can have a chance to get something that might be out of print, and they update the cover. So that's we're not trying to trick you into buying a book you already bought. It's just it's just to kind of freshen the look. So I love those covers too.
All right. Too Good to Be True. This was another Rita Award winner. Do you want to talk about Grace?
Grace is in the very difficult situation of her fiance broke up with her in order to date her younger sister, which makes her sister sound like this really heartless person, but she's not. She's wonderful, and Grace adores her, and she actually gives them her blessing and then suffers in silence until she decides that enough with all the questions and pity from her family. She's going to say that she's dating someone, so she makes up a guy, Wyatt Dunn, and he's a pediatric surgeon, and she tells her family, like, oh, I am seeing someone. It's just that, he's always traveling to save children's lives, and that's why you haven't met him yet. And then meanwhile, an ex-con moves next door and is delightfully attractive, and he's not an ex-con for any bad reasons, just so you know.
And this is this the only book in your home state? Is that
right?
Or maybe
yes, this is the only book set in Connecticut. And it's funny, one reviewer said, like the sense of setting that I was so good at before was lacking in this book. And I was like, really? Come on. It's in the backyard.
All right. The next best thing. Lucy.
I love this book. It's one of my favorites of my own books. It's about a young widow named Lucy, who met the love of her life, and they were married for a while, and then her husband dies in a car accident, and somehow or another she ends up sleeping with his younger brother Ethan. And then eventually she says, I need to find a husband. I want to have children, but I don't want to risk having my heart broken again. I want like Mr. Not So Bad rather than Mr. Right. And so she tells Ethan, we need to stop sleeping together. And of course, he's the hero of the story and spends a lot of time trying to convince her that he is the one for her. I love this story because Lucy works in a family bakery, and of course, bakery is what's better than a bakery, but it's run by her mom and her great aunts. And those great aunts were based on my own great aunts, who were very salty, very funny, very devoted to each other, and filled with all sorts of fun religious superstition, the way these aunts are.
Yeah, I think I read on your website, they taught you to play cards, swear, and other important life skills. So that's always important, right?
Right.
All right.
They were the best.
All right. Now, this was one of the best 20 romances of 2010 by Kirkus, which is a pretty big honor.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about this one.
This book is the story of Cali Gray, who is this book was inspired because I was on a train coming back from New York, and a young woman sitting across from me was on the phone begging her boyfriend to reconsider. She loved him. They were so happy. She just didn't understand. And I was sitting there handing her tissues and saying, hang up, sweetheart, um, and she just wouldn't. And I thought, how mortifying to have this kind of meltdown in public.
Mhm.
So, of course, that's what Callie does. She's been in love with her boss, had an affair with him, and now he's engaged to someone else. And she has a meltdown in the Department of Motor Vehicles, which is my version of hell on earth. And the man behind her is quite horrified with her display of emotion. He's the new vet in town, and the hero of the story.
And you also took your ad agency background and used it for the background of some of this, right?
Yeah, that it's fun as a writer. You get to have all these different jobs, and I love to research what my characters do. In my upcoming book, the character is a midwife, so I got to talk to a midwife and that kind of thing. But for this one, I used advertising, and it was really fun to kind of revisit that.
Yeah. All right. I think this one, I'm not sure. All I ever wanted, the one on the right.
Mhm.
I think that might be a
I think it's a British.
version. Yeah, it's a different. But I love some of the translated covers.
Yeah, me too.
They're pretty cool, and I didn't include them. I wish I had.
Some of them are hilarious
Yeah,
too.
yeah, they are kind of funny.
Disturbing.
You can go on Amazon and look if you want. All right. You have amazing reviews. Talk about my one and only.
Um, this is another one of my favorite books. It is the story of Harper, who is a very skilled divorce attorney, lives on Martha's Vineyard, and her ex-husband, Nick. They got married very young. He was completely confident in their love and commitment to each other, but he kind of strands her alone in New York City, where he works, and she's not quite in law school yet. And for about a year or two, he's a really bad husband without being cruel or anything. He's just absent. And they get a divorce. And then 12 years later, small world, her stepsister is marrying his half brother out in Glacier National Park in Montana.
Mhm.
So she thinks, oh my God, after 12 years, I'm going to see Nick again. And they end up getting stuck, having to drive quite a way to an airport after there's a software glitch in the control, the air controller system. So there's nothing like forced proximity in a romance novel. And so I love sticking two people who don't want to be together.
Yeah. All right. I think one of my favorite reissue covers is the Blue Door one.
I love that one. Yeah.
I
So
know. Is
pretty.
that trade paperback
I
or
think
is
that's
that large print?
The Australian
Oh,
version of, and
okay.
it is a trade paperback. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So
All
pretty.
right. Another Best Book nominee, Until There Was You. Talk a little bit about Posy.
Posy was a really fun character for me to write because she was very different from myself. She's very small and petite, and also a tomboy who's very skilled. Her job is taking down old buildings and salvaging what can be salvaged from them. And I just thought, what a cool job, to go to an old Victorian or an old church or bar and take it apart piece by piece,
Mhm.
which she does with great reverence. And the hero in the story is Liam, and he is a guy who worked for her parents. He was the classic bad boy in high school. He slept around, he rode a motorcycle and played in a band, and she had such a crush on him. Um, and years later, 17, 18 years later, he's back in town. He's now the widowed dad of a teenage girl,
Mhm.
and trying to live down his reputation as that bad boy, kind of coming face to face with it,
Mhm.
with all the damage he did and the carelessness with which he treated a lot of women.
Mhm.
And Posy's, number one rule is like, do not get near Liam again. And of course she does. So
Yeah. And it's also in his point of view. isn't
Yeah,
it?
I think this was the first book where I wrote the male point of view, and I before that I had written first person from the
Mhm.
female's point of view, and it was just working for me. And I thought I feel like Liam has too much to say for it to only be seen through Posy's eyes. And I really enjoyed writing from the male point of view in that story
Yeah.
because he is a dad of a teenage girl. He's terrified that she's going to fall for someone like he was, and he's trying to raise her well and keep his past a secret from her.
Okay. Here's Somebody to Love.
Yeah.
Library Journal is another great review magazine for libraries. Star reviews are awesome. So this
Especially
was
from
pretty
libraries.
excellent. Yeah. So tell us about this one with Parker.
So this book was my first spin-off. It's Parker in the book is the best friend of Lucy from the bakery in
Oh,
The Next Best Thing.
yes.
And I loved her character. She is a single mom. She is fabulously wealthy. So she's the first wealthy person I wrote. And the romance genre is filled with people who are extraordinarily wealthy because it's fun to read about, people who live in penthouses and have drivers and shop at Tiffany's. So I thought I had set her up as that in the first book in The Next Best Thing. So I thought I don't think I want to write about an actual billionaire. So the first thing I did was I made her broke. Her father scams her out of her trust fund. And the only thing she has left is this rickety little house in Maine, the same setting as my second book, uh, Catch of the Day.
Mhm.
So we get to see the characters, Maggie, who is in love with the priest. She goes to the diner, she runs into Malone, the captain of the Ugly Inn, and she falls for a person she never thought she'd fall for, her
Mhm.
father's attorney.
All right. Um, this is, I wanted to, you were just talking about a little bit of overlap with the characters,
Mhm.
but it's not major overlap. These are the ones that are a little more overlapped as far as characters, correct? In the Blue Heron
Right.
series? Okay.
This is a legitimate series,
Okay.
so all the characters are very interwoven into each other's stories. And the reason I wrote a series was because my readers asked me to and kept asking me to. All of my books had been standalones until I wrote that linked book, and it was kind of a practice run for writing a series. The thing about writing a series is whatever you say in book one has to be true in books two, three, four, and five, and it's a bit more complicated in some ways because you have to be true to what you said and the characters have to recur and be important enough.
Mhm.
So I set this book in the Finger Lakes region of New York, which is wine country up there, a place that I did not know existed until I decided to write a book about a family run vineyard.
Mhm.
And so it starts off with Faith Holland, who's one of the four Holland children, and her dad runs Blue Heron Vineyard. She comes back to town after having been left at the altar by a man who comes out as gay that day. Um, and she still loves him. He's still a wonderful, wonderful person. And she really blames his best man, Levi, who outed him pretty much. He basically said to his friend Jeremy, don't do this. You can't, because Levi knew that Jeremy was gay. And Levi becomes the hero. I love writing characters who don't like each other at first. So they have some great spar dialogue, snappy one liners and
Mhm.
insults and that kind of thing.
Yes. Talk about the next one, Perfect Match.
Perfect Match was I really wanted to do a book about an arranged marriage, which is hard to do in contemporary times,
Mhm.
unless you're writing about a culture that does arranged marriages, and I was not. But I love the trope. I love that, I'm marrying someone I don't really know. It's mutually beneficial to us both, and then we'll fall in love. So this is the story of the second daughter in the in the Holland family, and she's actually older than Faith, Honor Holland,
Mhm.
and her husband of convenience, Tom, who's an Englishman who's needs a green card to stay near his almost stepson, his ex-fiance's son, who's the most miserable and delicious teenager. He's just like, everything that we, you know, hate about teenagers is in Charlie. I love teenagers, especially the grumpy ones. I call them the unlovables. And if there's an unlovable, it's like, that's my kid. I'm going to be friends with this kid. So I had a blast writing this book, and also showing a different side of Honor. In the first book, she's painted in a certain light. And in the second book, you get to know her a lot better and really start to like her.
Tell us who Tom is named after.
He's named after Tom Hardy, the British actor.
Yeah, did you start out with some other names first, and then you ended up with Tom?
I did. I was going through the list, and I thought, I love the actor Tom Hardy. I think he's so talented and so handsome. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to name him Tom.
There you go. All right. And then the third in the series, Waiting on You.
Yeah, so I didn't plan to write a story for the O'Rourke twins. Colleen is Faith's best friend and the owner of the only restaurant open year round in Manningsport, New York, which is based on Hammondsport, New York, and the tiniest little postage stamp of a town. So she runs the restaurant. She runs the bar. Her twin brother, is the chef. And I just thought, I don't know, Colleen just wants a story. And she's portrayed as kind of shallow, a little silly, a little slutty, but it's all a ruse. She has never dated anyone seriously because she's still in love with her high school boyfriend.
This is your first set of twins that you wrote, and you have a couple other books too.
It's not my first. Maggie was a twin in Catch of the Day. She was an identical
yes,
twin.
yes. All right.
I do love twins. I wished I had been one. I feel like my sister is my twin. She's only a year younger. I loved books about twins, Mitch and Amy. I think it was that Judy Blume. So yeah, I loved writing fraternal twins, male and female, and they have such great rapport. They drive each other crazy in all the best ways.
All right. In Your Dreams, another Library Journal review, star review. Jack Holland, now he's the brother of the other two girls.
Yeah, and it's funny, when I was writing the series, I thought I'd do Faith, Honor, and Jack. But after writing his sister's stories, I felt like he was a little bit too fraternal at the moment. It was kind of weird to think, oh, now Jack's, the romantic hero. So I wrote Colleen's book and got a little distance from Jack. And he is a divorced guy. And the book opens with a tragic accident that he witnesses where a bunch of teenage boys break through the guardrail and go into the frozen lake. And Jack rescues them. He's a former Navy guy. And but one guy is underwater for a while and he has significant brain damage, and it just haunts Jack. The heroine of this story is a police officer named Emmeline, and she's been in town and she's pretty happy as she is, but then she gets an invitation to her former fiance's wedding and casts about for a date. And I think one of Jack's sisters offers him up, like, Jack will go with you. He's great at that kind of thing. And they fall in love.
Your husband helped with the car accident scene.
Yeah, my husband is a firefighter, and he's creeping up the stairs right now. You can come up, honey. So I often turn to my husband when I'm writing any kind of accident or 911 scene, asking him, like, how long would it take for a car to sink? how hard would it be to swim without a wetsuit in January? Um, uh, what would it look like? What would the car look like? All the kind of mechanical things, and he's a great resource, and
That's awesome.
always happy to help out. I always love when I need him for a scene.
There you go. All right. If you only knew, now this is you start branching out into women's fiction more.
Yeah. Which,
Yeah.
women's fiction and romance are twins, I guess you could say. Women's fiction is a little bit more about the heroine's issues and journey, and a little bit less about the romance, but there's always a romance in it, whether it's a good one or a bad one. So in this story, we have Jenny, who's a wedding dress designer, and she moves back to her hometown, and rents an apartment from a piano teacher. Leo was one of my favorite heroes that I've ever written, and Leo has a tragic past that he does not want to talk about, and immediately warns her, like, do not fall in love with me. Nope, I'm not. I'm made for fun only. And then the other part of the story is Rachel, her older sister, who has triplets, 3-year-old triplet daughters, and finds out that her husband is cheating on her in the first chapter. And she has this perfect, lovely life that she adores. And this moment comes where, she has to decide, like, well, do I kick him out? What am I going to do? I'm a stay-at-home mom with 3 girls, 3 preschool girls. So the story is about these 2 sisters who love each other very much and their relationship issues, and it ends very happily for both of them.
I liked some of your personal. You took your daughter to a dress designer because she was engaged, right? And she was the practice bride, which I think that's awesome.
She was. I don't know anything about making wedding dresses, but I've watched Say Yes to the Dress quite a bit. And I used to tell my family, like, this is for research. I promise someday I'll write a wedding dress designer. So I contacted one, and she said, I'd love to kind of like watch what you would say to a bride, questions you would ask. And she's like, well, do you have a daughter? And I think my daughter was 17 at the time. So she got to go and play dress up and, have this lady sketch her a dress and look at, all the different kinds of lace and satin and silk. And it was really fun. It was a blast.
Did she choose that kind of dress for her wedding last summer or no?
It wasn't, now that I think of it, it wasn't really that dissimilar. It was, very simple, elegant dress.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. I just, again, love all these covers. All right. Anything for you?
This was the last book in the Blue Heron series. And so this is about the other twin, Connor O'Rourke, who runs the kitchen end of O'Rourke's Tavern. Okay. And Connor's kind of grumpy, and he's a wonderful chef. And, different women flirt with him, but he doesn't seem to have anybody. And what I loved about this book is that the heroine is Jessica Dunn, and she is introduced in the very first book. I never had any intention of making her into a major character. She is just kind of a tough girl from high school, and Faith was always a little scared of her because she was like a tough townie, and she called Faith the princess. And she just really started to grow during the series, so that you could see she was, she was more dimensional and layered than just kind of the tough girl who was a waitress. And she becomes one of my favorite characters I've ever written.
You said, I read somewhere you ate a lot of nachos while writing this book. Was it because of the bar?
Yeah, Connor's nachos are things of legend, and also my favorite tavern food. I can demolish a giant pile of nachos all by myself.
I need no reason to eat nachos, but and then also the Davy character. He's losing based on somebody or a program that you worked with.
Yeah, I did a lot of volunteering with special need young adults, and Davy is he had fetal alcohol syndrome, and so he had some issues related to that. So he's pretty high functioning, but he lives with Jessica, and he was based on one of my clients whom I just adored. Um, and I like my books to include people from all walks of life, and I had a couple of um, intellectually uh, intellectually delayed or disabled people in other books, but Davy was a pretty main character, and I really enjoyed writing him.
That's awesome. This is one of my, I love tulips. And so all of the covers have tulips on them, I think. um, do you want to talk about Ainsley a little bit? Whoop.
And maybe you can't go on the internet.
Well,
There you are. I think I got you back. Are you still here?
I think I've lost you, Anita.
I
Are we
have
back?
you.
Oh,
I think
okay, there we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on second thought. Sorry, my
It's
screen
okay.
went off for a minute. Yeah, this book is another connected book. It's set in the same town as If You Only Knew, the wedding dress designer and the mom of triplets. And again, it's about sisters, but sisters who weren't close growing up. They're half sisters, actually. And Ainsley is the younger sister, and she's just this bright, shiny golden retriever puppy of a person. And she's been engaged to the same guy for years and years, and he gets cancer during their courtship, and she's wonderful through it. And when he's finally cancer free, they throw this big party, and she knows he's going to propose. She's found the ring, and as he's making the speech, there's like a little scuffle in the crowd, a little accident. Someone trips and falls and hits his head and dies, and it's her brother-in-law, her older sister's husband. And so the other narrator in the story is Kate, who is abruptly widowed, has just moved to Cambria-on-Hudson, my fictional town in Westchester County, New York, from Brooklyn. And she's kind of stranded there in this town where she knows no one except Ainsley, her sister. And then this guy dying inspires Eric, the almost fiance, to have more adventures and live life large, and he breaks up with Ainsley. And so she shows up at Kate's house and says, I need a place to live. And the two sisters grow close throughout this time.
All right. And these were based on a friend's daughters, based their names, right?
Yes, they are. One of my high school friends has a
Yeah.
daughter and a daughter,
I think
Ainsley.
it's kind of cool when you can insert a few truths in somewhere, and maybe only a few people know it, but it's pretty awesome.
Right. I sometimes will ask my readers on social media if they can help me out with name suggestions.
Ah,
And in this case, Leslie just had the best names.
okay. That's awesome. All right. Now that you mention it.
Oh, yeah. So
Now,
this,
is this one also? No, it's not the Cambria-on-Hudson one.
no, it's not.
It's a standalone.
This,
Okay.
this was my third Rita Award, and this is the story of Nora Stewart, who is a doctor in Boston, and the opening scene, she gets hit crossing the street, and if you've ever been to Boston, that is a very, very possible thing that could happen. Boston drivers are not known for their caution. So she gets bumped badly enough to like dislocate her knee and break her collarbone, and she thinks, for a minute, she thinks she's dead in the hospital. She's just drugged up, and she's thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to wear to my funeral? And who's going to take care of my dog? And she also hears her boyfriend, who's an ER doctor, flirting with a nurse. And when she comes to, she breaks up with him, and she thinks, I want to go home to this little island off the coast of Maine where I grew up. She wants to get close to her mother. She wants her mother to take care of her a little bit. And her niece, her sister's daughter, is staying with her grandmother for the summer. So she thinks I'll get to know Poe and I will get closer to my mom and I'll find out what finally happened to my dad because he disappears when she's 11. He leaves and there's never a word about what happened to him.
There's a Tweety bird scene that I read about. You want to talk a little bit about
Yeah, so
the bird in the book?
I used to be very afraid of birds. It was my weird phobia. The smaller, the worse, right? So hummingbirds, parakeets, and my great aunt, whom I mentioned before, one of the, people who taught me to curse and make gestures at people in traffic. She had a little parakeet that she loved named Tweety. And the bird would like sit on her shoulder and they would like share food mouth to mouth. I mean, just made me cringe. And she didn't care that I was horrified. She loved to talk about Tweety. And Tweety met a sad end that
Oh,
I thought when I heard the story, like I had to cover my mouth so she wouldn't see that I was laughing at her pain.
oh, no.
But it was like the funniest story. And I had to include it.
That's cute. I also love these covers. Again, I think that's the Australian version, way on the right.
Yes,
I
yeah,
don't
they do
know
a
what it
nice.
is about windows, but I really love those
They
covers.
work. Keep it up, Australia.
Yeah, and good luck with that. I actually bought this in an airport. Um,
Oh,
I was passing through and I grabbed it, and there you go. Talk about this one. This one's kind of important in about body image and everything.
yeah. This book is extremely important to me, and this is the book for which I've received the most fan mail by far. So this is the story of three women who went to weight loss camp as teenagers together, and they become friends and stay friends. One of them becomes the unkind medical term is super morbidly obese. She weighs more than 600 pounds. She can't leave her house. She doesn't get out of bed. And we've all seen those shows that kind of fetishize the people who are of that size. But um, the truth is, like, there's no real option here. You're either going to lose weight and get healthier, or you're going to die. And Emerson dies in the first scene, and her two friends, Marley and oh God, her name just went out of my head. Georgia, Marley and Georgia, are there, and they say, Emerson gives them this list, a list they made on their last day at camp. Things we'll do when we're skinny. This book was very personal for me to write because it's about women and size and self-esteem in America. And I don't think there's an American woman who has not been affected by thinking, I'm not right in my physical self somehow. And I, so the challenge for Marley and Georgia is to do the things on the list, some of which are small, some of which are big, and do it without losing weight. For Marley's like, I'm not going to try to lose weight anymore. I'm done with that, and she's a curvy woman, and healthy. She's one of those people who has a lot of, a significant amount of extra weight, but is healthy, exercises, runs, eats well. And then Georgia has sort of a less healthy take on it. She is losing weight, but not for good reasons. She's sick, but she's also thinking like, oh yeah, but I'm losing weight. And, there's that line in The Devil Wears Prada where Emily Blunt's character says, I'm one stomach virus away from my goal weight. And that's the kind of thing that women are subjected to, lose weight, and then we're the society of food at the same time. So I wanted to write a book where you can find peace with your physical self without changing your physical self. And it was a very personal book, and it touched a lot of readers. And I'm actually happy to say that film rights were sold last year for it.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah.
I'm going to move along here because we're almost
Oh
15
gosh.
minutes down before
Okay.
we're done. Life and Other Inconveniences.
Oh, this is another book set in Connecticut. I
Yeah.
said a couple in Connecticut. I remember that now.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I this book was inspired by visiting the town of Stonington, Connecticut, which is this little seaside town, the last town in Connecticut before Rhode Island. And it's the home of some beautiful, beautiful houses. And so the book was inspired by a house on a point, and I just loved that house, and I thought, I want to set a story here. It was almost like the house owned by the heroine's grandmother, Genevieve,
mm,
uh, is a character in the story. So this is the story of Emma, who is estranged from the grandmother who helped raise her after her mom's suicide.
mm,
And Genevieve summons her home after 16 years of being estranged. They're estranged because Emma got pregnant in high school and Genevieve kicks her out.
mhm,
Um, and so she brings her daughter Riley back with her. And I loved writing this book because it's the point of view of an 85-year-old woman. And I just loved being in her head, envisioning what it's like to be in her aging body, to have been a woman of some power and influence, and now, just like everyone is getting older and winding down.
mhm.
So there's a story of the reconciliation, I guess, over the summer.
Yeah. Um, Always the Last to Know. Now
Isn't
this
it?
is pretty cool. Book of the Week in People magazine. So that was
Yeah,
amazing.
my first one.
Woo!
Actually, I think Life and Other Inconveniences was as well.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I had two in a row. I was very excited about that. Um, This is also set in Stoningham, my
Mhm,
fictionalized version of Stonington,
mhm,
and it's told from the three Frost women, the mother and her two daughters.
mhm,
The mom is the first selectman of the town. She's a very capable woman, but she's been in a really stale marriage for a really long
mhm,
time. And she decides, "Yeah, I'm going to file for a divorce. Like
mhm,
between now and dead, how do I want my life to be?"
mhm,
And that day, her husband has a massive stroke
mhm,
and is going to need a lot of care. And then there's Juliet, sort of the perfect daughter who lives a perfect life. She's got the perfect husband, two daughters, beautiful house. She's an architect, and
mhm,
she's running to stand still. And then this new woman comes into her company and starts to kind of take over as the voice of females in architecture. And Juliet thinks like, am I done now? Have I peaked already at 42? And then the younger sister, Sadie, is uh, an art teacher in New York City. She loves her dad, so she comes back for the summer to take care of him, and she's convinced he'll get better.
mhm,
And while she's taking care of him, she has to be around her high school boyfriend, Noah. And theirs was a story of a very true and deep love, but the timing is never right, and they want different things. So they have this pain of still loving each other, but not being able to figure out how to make their relationship work, and until of course they do.
all right. Again, there's birds and I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, I haven't seen that cup cover, believe it.
Oh, I think,
That
yeah.
might be the large print version of that.
Yeah, on the left, yes. And then
Yeah,
the other one, I have the trade paperback version, which is, I think, the right.
I
So,
think it's so pretty. Yeah.
yeah, the colors are amazing. Um, I didn't know if we wanted to talk about this.
Oh, this
We
is
have a couple
here's
minutes.
my daughter, my cover model.
Oh,
My friend Joss and I do a podcast called Crappy Friends, and it's we take letters from people who've had bad experiences with female friendships and offer our advice, occasionally calling in our friend who's a legitimate psychologist. We are just fascinated with female friendships and kind of the mythology around them, that women are friends till the end. You're my best friend from kindergarten, you're my best friend at 90. And it can be really tough when a female friendship goes wrong, and both Joss and I had that experience, and um it definitely left a mark and made us older and wiser. um we get hundreds of letters from people asking, what should I do? Can this friendship ever work out? We used to be so close. Um, and so this is just sort of a labor of love, and we made it into a book called Crappy Friends: The Ultimate Guide to Female Friendships, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Okay, finally, I'm sure people are waiting about this. I know a lot of our patrons are like, I was sobbing this book.
You're
I mean,
welcome.
there's fun parts, but there's a lot of heavy stuff in this.
Yeah, this is definitely a tearjerker.
Mm,
But I also think that you will end this book feeling uplifted and your faith in humanity restored. It's interesting. I started writing it before the pandemic, but this is the story of one man going through the hardest time of his life after his beloved wife dies from a terminal illness.
mhm,
And it came out, last June. We're just starting to come out of the
mhm,
pandemic, before Delta, before Omicron. And uh, it's a story about, how do you do it? How do you step one foot in front of the other? What do your days look like in that first year of widowhood for Joshua, who is on the spectrum, who works by himself, who has a very small family of origin? He is really lost without Lauren. And Lauren foresaw this. So she wrote um, a letter for him for each month of that first year and gave him a job to do in each letter. And it starts out small. It starts off like, go to the grocery store. You need new food. And Josh is so happy to hear from her, even in letter form. He's so delighted. And the tasks get a little harder and a little bigger as the year goes on. But it's like she's walking him through. And I think it's an incredibly beautiful love story. And it's a story about how to take care of your spouse, because Josh is a wonderful caregiver, a wonderful husband. And Lauren is so good to him as well. And it's also a story of how do you handle loss. Um, and I love this book, and I think I from the letters that I've gotten, everyone who's read it, no matter how many tissues you used during it, has been so glad they read it.
yeah. And I'm sure you were over the moon with all these star reviews. That's Publishers Weekly, Booklist, Kirkus. I mean, those
Yeah,
are
yeah.
fantastic. I think we want to talk about what's coming out in June for you.
Okay, so that's the mass market of Pack Up the Moon. So that's the smaller version
Yeah.
that'll come out in
I
March.
don't know if I have the other one. No,
Oh, okay.
I didn't
So
find the other one yet. So anyway,
my next book is called Out of the Clear Blue Sky, and this one is
oh, sorry, you're right. Here we go.
oh, there we go. Look at that.
Sorry,
You got
I was
it.
on the wrong one.
So this is after writing Pack Up the Moon, and I wanted to write something lighter and funnier again. And this book is very poignant too, because it's a story of a woman who has raised her only child, her son Dylan. He's going off to college. She lives on Cape Cod, and he's going to school at the University of Montana. And the night before his high school graduation, her husband tells her he's met someone else and he'll be leaving her when their son goes off to Montana.
Mhm.
So, in a day, in a sentence, she goes from being a wife and mother to being alone. And she goes a little off the rails. And I absolutely loved writing that. What what do women do with their anger when they feel, in this case, he's been cheating on her, he's made plans without her ever being told that her marriage was in jeopardy. She just thought, well, it's Dylan's last year in high school, we've both been distracted, right? Especially her husband has been very distracted. So she goes on sort of a revenge plan to make his life miserable for those 5 weeks between him telling her and when he actually leaves. And then kind of does her best to make him unhappy, but also she has to learn who she is outside of being a wife and mother. She's a midwife. She's wonderful at her job. she's a sister, but she's not real close with her sister. Her parents are very colorfully divorced and can't stand each other. It's a story of reinvention, I think, and I think it's very funny and has a few poignant scenes, but overall, I think it's a story. I've seen a lot of my friends in this situation, where the kids go off to college and they're done. Um, and you're in your 40s or 50s and here you are having to almost start over in some ways. So I really enjoyed writing this one, and I think readers will love it. And the two characters in it are Lily, the wronged woman, and the other woman, Melissa. And I got to tell you how much fun it was to write a money grubbing gold digger. She was a blast to write. And because I'm
That's
an optimist, by the end of the book, she's a little bit more than we gave her credit for being. So she gets redemption too.
all right. I cannot wait for that one. We do have one question from Kelsey. Her 10-year-old daughter is an avid reader and has just started getting into writing stories. Is there any advice you have for her to support her?
Well, right off the bat, Kelsey's daughter should know that she is special, because most people don't make up stories for fun in their spare time. That's not most people's hobby. So her imagination is already, you know, identifying her as somebody who has this gift. Um, I would tell her to write often and to read the kind of authors that she's trying to aspire to be like. So if she likes fantasy, she should be reading fantasy, and also to reach out to those authors, because everyone loves to hear from a 10-year-old kid who loved their book. So um, they'll be able to point her in the right direction. I find that writers are very generous, especially with kids, and just encourage her. It's a wonderful thing, and you can make a living being a writer, and you it can be a lifelong love whether you get published or not.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. Oops, I wanted to share, you can be found a lot of places online.
Oh my God. Am
And
I really on all those sites?
I
Anita,
think
you know
you
more than
are.
I do.
I looked at all of them, so I think you are.
I think I am too.
Um, a few things. How far ahead do you work, like on future projects? Do you usually, I mean, you were doing like a couple a year and now you're maybe one a year
Yeah,
as
I
far
do
as
one book
publishing?
a year, just because it's I think it's my publisher says it's better to have one book a year, in my case. And writing two books a year was a stretch for me. But I I'm sorry, what was the question?
Like, how far out are you writing? I mean,
Yes.
your next book is coming out in June. You're probably already writing another one, right?
Yes. So I'm working on the June 2023 book now.
Okay.
And
Any hints on what it's about?
it's about a it's also set on Cape Cod. I'm writing a little bit more of a series. So a lot of my next few books will be set in Wellfleet, Mass. And so that's where Out of the Clear Blue Sky is set. And Josh and Lauren go to the Cape in Pack Up the Moon. This is a book about a woman who gave up a child for adoption when she was in college. And 17 years later, he comes walking back into her bookstore with the dad who adopted him. And, really shakes up her life because she never told anyone that she was pregnant, anyone in her family.
Right.
So I'm excited about that book, and I love the family that she's in. She's in another big, messy family, which is kind of where I live.
Yay. Have you ever wanted to write something in a totally different genre?
I would love to be able to write a suspense novel. I love to read them. I love Girl on the Train, Gone Girl, Woman in the Window. I love those books, and I just don't think I have the time to really plot one out. Not at this point in my life, anyway. And I don't know that I have the talent either.
Yeah.
So,
Um, who, well, you already said a few of them. I was going to say, who are your favorite authors?
well, I love Robin Carr, who wrote Virgin River, which is now a Netflix series. And she's one of my best friends in the writing world. I love Quanah Jackson, who writes. Her last book was called How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days. It was delightful. I love reading new authors. I just read Lynn Liao Butler's book, The Red Thread of Fate, which was tremendous. And right now I'm reading The Kindest Lie, which I think is a debut novel by Nancy Johnson.
Oh, yes.
There we go. And it's terrific. I'm not too far in, but it's fantastic.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I love
Oh, go ahead.
Center. Gosh, I mean, there's so many favorite authors.
I think this is on your website, but what are some of your hobbies outside of the writing world?
Well, I right these days I like to clean. We've been renovating our house for 100 years, and we're very close to moving in. So every day I go over and like vacuum up sawdust and wipe down counters. I love children. I love the New York Yankees. I used to love going to the movies. I haven't been to a movie since the pandemic. And I love restoring old furniture and going to tag sales with my husband.
Um, let's see, mixology.
Oh yeah, I'm a great
Yeah.
bartender. I will muddle herbs and flowers and make you the prettiest
That's
cocktail
awesome.
you ever saw.
Do you have a lot of your books are also an audiobook?
I think all of them.
And I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Is it Z Sands?
Exie Sands, yeah.
Exie Sands. Is she in all of your audiobooks? Or?
She was my first audiobook narrator. She did not do the Blue Heron series because the publisher thought it was time for a change, but I asked for her back.
Okay.
Although Amy Rubinet, who did the Blue Heron series, did a great job. But Exie and I have become great friends through our collaborations. And I love to listen to her narrate a book because it elevates my work somehow. And she gives it such nuance and depth. It's really it's such a talent, and she's incredible. I'll listen to anything she narrates.
That's awesome. We're coming down to the end. Kelsey, by the way, says thank you so much for your encouragement for her daughter. I am just so thrilled that you were willing to come on and talk with us tonight. So thank you so much, and best wishes on your future books and your endeavors. Kristan has multiple ways you can read about her and her books. I put them all up there. Or you can always go to KristanHiggins.com and read it yourself. There's a lot of fun stuff out there. Her blog, her newsletter, her short stories. I don't know how you get your short stories. Is it the newsletter?
Yeah, you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free short story.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, thank you, virtual audience out there. It would be so fun to actually have you here, but virtual is the best way to do. So
someday.
Yeah, hopefully that would be really fun. I used to go to conferences all the time, but that hasn't been in lately. So
yeah.
But anyway, romance is such a wonderful community, and women's fiction, and just it's an encouraging community, which I love. So anyway, thank you again. And I just want to plug a couple things for our library, if I can find it. We do have a lot of things coming up. We have some mental health workshops coming up. So anybody out there near River Falls, Wisconsin, just go to riverfallspubliclibrary.org and search for events and click on Winter 2022 programs. And we appreciate you watching. So thank you again, Kristan, and have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome.